America's withdrawal from Afghanistan ended up in a chaotic evacuation. The image of a helicopter lifting off above the U.S. Embassy in Kabul has drawn comparison to the fall of Saigon in 1975. House GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik tweeted, "This is Joe Biden's Saigon."
This is President Biden's Saigon moment.
Meanwhile, Biden and his team rejects the Saigon analogy.
This is manifestly not Saigon.
It's not hard to see why the comparison resonates. Both the fall of Kabul and the fall of Saigon concluded generation-long wars, both capitals taken over more quickly than the U.S. expected, both evacuations chaotic and heart-wrenching, and both President Ford and Biden inherited the wars from their predecessors. But let's look at the details. This is 1973, 2 years before the fall of Saigon. U.S. combat forces leaving Vietnam. Fast forward to 1975, Americans noticed the inevitable collapse of South Vietnam as North Vietnamese troops advanced. The evacuation started on April 4th, but the fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975 was still a great panic. With sea lanes blocked, helicopter was the only possible transport. Within 24 hours, 7,000 people, 5,500 of them Vietnamese, were relocated to U.S. ships in the South China Sea. Just last month, Biden asserted that history wouldn't repeat itself.
There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan.
A few weeks later, comparisons of Saigon and Kabul became a meme. Biden admitted the situation in Kabul was amounting to one of the, quote, most difficult airlifts in history. More than 28,000 people have been evacuated since August 14th, according to Biden in a press conference Sunday. The Taliban has control over the whole country and is blocking the roads to the Kabul airport. Thousands of Afghans are desperately waiting on the other side of the fence, including translators, former employees of the U.S. government, and their families.
There is no way to evacuate this many people without pain and loss of heartbreaking images you see on television.
While the optics might be strikingly similar, not everybody agrees the comparison is fair.
I think the analogy between the fall of Saigon and the fall of Kabul is not valid for the most part. What was happening in Vietnam was a major, perhaps the major issue in American politics from the mid-1960s until the early 1970s. With Saigon, lots of people thought, especially, I should say, conservatives, thought the United States should never have, quote, abandoned the South Vietnamese government, should have kept fighting there. Whereas in Afghanistan, the withdrawal was something which both parties supported. Biden's only responsibility, I think, right now is to handle this withdrawal in a humane and efficient way.
So what can we learn from Vietnam with regard to refugee resettlement? After the fall of the Vietnam War, a wave of 130,000 refugees came to the U.S. President Ford spent $450 million on Vietnamese refugees. That's the equivalent of more than $2 billion today. The refugees first settled in assimilation centers and then dispersed, often living in neighborhoods around the country called Little Saigon. Over the next 20 years, thanks to reforms in asylum policies, another 500,000 Vietnamese refugees found home in the United States, often braving dangerous journeys to get here. It was not without controversy. Now, in Afghanistan, 6,000 troops are back in Kabul to help with the evacuation. 11,000 people have been airlifted over the weekend, but there's a long way to go. According to the International Refugee Assistance Project, over 18,000 special immigration visa applicants are waiting in line, plus 70,000 family members eligible for the program. Biden is allocating $500 million for, quote, unexpected urgent refugee and migration needs.
There are people who've helped us in this mission. There are people whose lives are going to be at risk, and we have to do everything that we can to bring them to safety.
America's always been the country that opens our heart. And by the way, refugees to this country have always been the ones that are extremely entrepreneurial.
It remains to be seen if the U.S. will accept as many Afghan refugees as we did from Vietnam and fulfill the moral obligation promised by members of both political parties.